In the shadowed corridors of history where power weaves its silent webs, the Rockefeller family stands as a colossus of ambition, their name synonymous with wealth, control, and a relentless drive to reshape the world. From the dusty streets of 19th century America, they rose from obscurity to forge an empire that stretched beyond oil wells, infiltrating the very systems that govern life: agriculture, medicine, education, and global politics. Their story is not one of mere success, but of calculated domination, a tale of a family who saw the world as a chessboard and themselves as its grandmasters, moving pieces to secure their legacy at the expense of humanity's freedom. This chronicle unveils their machinations, exposing a dynasty that cloaked its hunger for power in the guise of philanthropy, leaving a world forever altered by their touch. The Rockefellers' influence, like a creeping fog, seeped into every facet of society, leaving no stone unturned. In the fertile fields of America's heartland, they wielded petroleum as a weapon, orchestrating a conspiracy to dismantle independent farms and replace them with a mechanized, profit-driven system dependent on their oil. In the realm of health, they fused petroleum with pharmaceuticals, birthing big pharma and suppressing natural remedies to ensure that healing served their coffers rather than human well-being. Education, too, fell under their sway, transformed into a factory for compliant workers, stripped of critical thought to perpetuate their vision. And on the global stage, their strategic support for Israel secured oil interests in the Middle East, igniting conflicts that echo to this day. Each move was a step toward a world order designed to entrench their power, a legacy of control that looms over the present. As we trace their ascent from 1839 to 2025, the Rockefeller saga reveals a pattern of manipulation, where every act of generosity masked a deeper agenda. Their foundations, heralded as beacons of progress, were instruments of control, reshaping institutions to serve their interests. The destruction of farms, the monopolization of medicine, the standardization of education, and the geopolitical maneuvering in the Middle East were not isolated events, but threads in a tapestry of dominance. This narrative, drawn from the undercurrents of history, lays bare the Rockefeller dynasty's role as antagonists in a story of exploitation, their shadow stretching across time to shape a world where profit reigns supreme and freedom is but a memory. In the small, unassuming town of Richford, New York, John Davison Rockefeller was born in 1839, a child of modest means destined to cast a long shadow over the world. His father, William Avery Rockefeller, was a figure cloaked in infamy, a traveling salesman whose peddling of dubious elixirs and penchant for deception left a lasting mark on young John. Known as Devil Bill, William's schemes ranged from selling patent medicines to swindling locals, teaching his son the art of manipulation and the allure of wealth amassed through cunning. In contrast, John's mother, Eliza Davison, was a pillar of frugality and discipline, instilling in him a relentless work ethic and a calculating mind that saw every transaction as a stepping stone to power. By age 12, John was lending small sums at interest to neighbors, his precocious grasp of money hinting at a future where wealth would be not just a goal but a weapon. These early years were a crucible, forging a man whose ambition would not be contained by the humble circumstances of his birth, a man who saw in every dollar the potential to control not just markets but the very systems that govern society. At 16, John took his first steps toward empire, securing a position as a bookkeeper in Cleveland, Ohio, a burgeoning hub of commerce in the 1850s. His meticulous nature and unyielding drive set him apart as he pored over ledgers with a precision that bordered on obsession. Cleveland's proximity to the emerging oil fields of Pennsylvania positioned it as a gateway to the petroleum boom, and John, ever alert to opportunity, began to see in oil not just a commodity but a means to dominate an industrializing nation. By 1863, as the American Civil War fueled demand for kerosene and lubricants, Rockefeller made his move, partnering with chemist Samuel Andrews to build his first refinery. This was no mere business venture, it was the foundation of a dynasty, a calculated step toward controlling the lifeblood of a nation on the cusp of transformation. With Henry Flagler joining the enterprise, Rockefeller's network of refineries grew, his accounting prowess allowing him to outmaneuver competitors with ruthless efficiency. His vision was not limited to profit, it was about domination, about harnessing oil to bend markets, industries, and even societies to his will, a foreshadowing of the conspiracies that would later crush farms, reshape medicine, and control minds. The creation of Standard Oil in 1870 marked the birth of Rockefeller's empire, a machine of ambition that would reshape the world. Employing predatory tactics, secret deals with railroads to secure lower shipping rates, undercutting rivals' prices to force their collapse, and acquiring competitors through coercion or bankruptcy, Rockefeller built a monopoly that by the late 1860s was refining thousands of barrels daily. His methods were as insidious as they were effective. He negotiated rebates with railroads, ensuring his oil moved cheaper than his rivals, and used spies to gather intelligence on competitors' operations. By 1870, Standard Oil's tentacles had spread beyond Ohio, absorbing refineries in Pennsylvania and New York, its dominance a testament to Rockefeller's unrelenting hunger for control. This period was not just the rise of a company, but the laying of a foundation for a family that would wield power not through force, but through the manipulation of resources and systems. The seeds planted in these years would grow into a forest of influence, one that would entangle agriculture in a petroleum-driven conspiracy, transform medicine into a profit-driven machine, mold education to produce compliant workers, and secure geopolitical leverage through strategic alliances in the Middle East, all under the Rockefeller banner. As Standard Oil solidified its iron grip on the American oil industry, commanding nearly 90% of the nation's refineries by the 1880s, John D. Rockefeller turned his predatory gaze to the fertile heartland of rural America. The late 19th century was a golden era for farmers, whose independent operations formed the backbone of the nation's economy, feeding communities and sustaining a way of life rooted in self-sufficiency. Yet Rockefeller, with his unyielding ambition, saw in petroleum not just a source of fuel, but a weapon to dismantle this agrarian foundation. The advent of oil-powered machinery, tractors, harvesters, and chemical fertilizers derived from petroleum promised unprecedented efficiency, but Rockefeller ensured that these innovations came at a crippling cost. Standard Oil positioned itself as the sole supplier of these essential tools, charging exorbitant prices that ensnared farmers in a cycle of debt and dependency. By leveraging his monopoly, Rockefeller dictated the terms of agricultural progress, eroding the autonomy of those who tilled the land and setting the stage for a calculated assault on rural America. This was no mere business strategy, it was the opening salvo in a conspiracy to reshape society, a blueprint for the control he would later exert over medicine, education, and global politics. This was a deliberate plot to dismantle traditional agriculture, orchestrated with the precision of a chess grandmaster. Rockefeller's influence extended beyond oil to the railroads, which he manipulated through secret rebates and exclusive contracts, ensuring that farmers faced astronomical transportation costs for their crops and livestock. These prohibitive expenses made it impossible for small farmers to compete with emerging agribusinesses, which relied heavily on Standard Oil's products and enjoyed favorable terms due to their scale and alignment with industrial interests. By the 1890s, the rural landscape was littered with the wreckage of family farms, thousands of which collapsed under the weight of debt and unfair competition. Their lands were swiftly absorbed by large conglomerates, many of which were indirectly tied to Rockefeller's financial networks through investments and partnerships. The once vibrant patchwork of self-sufficient communities was transformed into a mechanized, oil-dependent system, tethered to Standard Oil's supply chain and beholden to Rockefeller's empire. This systematic destruction was not a byproduct of progress, but a calculated move to centralize food production, stripping farmers of their independence and paving the way for a future where Rockefeller's influence would dictate not just what America ate, but how it was produced. The consequences of this petroleum-driven conspiracy were profound and far-reaching, reshaping the very soul of the nation. The centralization of agriculture prioritized profit over sustainability, as sprawling monoculture farms replaced diverse small-scale operations, depleting soil and eroding biodiversity. Farmers, once proud symbols of American independence, were reduced to cogs in an industrial machine, their livelihoods dictated by the fluctuating price of oil and the whims of Rockefeller's empire. Rural communities, vibrant with local markets and cooperative traditions, withered as families were forced off their land, migrating to cities to serve as labor in Rockefeller-controlled industries. This calculated assault on agriculture was a harbinger of the broader control the Rockefellers would exert, a chilling preview of their ability to manipulate entire systems, be it medicine through their pharmaceutical empire, education through their standardized curricula, or geopolitics through strategic alliances in the Middle East. Rockefeller's petroleum empire did not merely fuel progress, it crushed a way of life, enriching his family while impoverishing the rural heart of America and setting a precedent for the global domination that would define their legacy. As the 20th century dawned, John D. Rockefeller's insatiable ambition turned to the realm of medicine, where the discovery of petrochemicals, compounds derived from his vast petroleum empire, offered a new frontier for profit and control. These oil-based substances could be synthesized into drugs, patentable and far more lucrative than the natural remedies, herbs, homeopathy, and naturopathy that dominated the era's medical landscape. At the time, holistic medicine was deeply entrenched, practiced by nearly half of America's 160,000 doctors and taught in scores of medical schools across the nation. These practices, rooted in centuries of tradition, empowered communities with accessible plant-based treatments, posing a direct threat to Rockefeller's vision of a centralized, drug-based medical system that would extend his oil monopoly into the very essence of human health. Rockefeller saw in this diversity not just competition, but an obstacle to his grand design, one that would fuse his petroleum empire with the burgeoning pharmaceutical industry. His plan was to reshape medicine into a profit-driven machine, a blueprint that would later influence agriculture, education, and even geopolitics in the Middle East, ensuring that every facet of society bore his imprint. To execute this vision, Rockefeller forged a formidable alliance with steel magnate Andrew Carnegie, pooling their immense wealth to seize control of the medical establishment. In 1901, he established the Rockefeller Institute for Medical Research, later Rockefeller University, a state-of-the-art facility dedicated to developing synthetic drugs derived from petrochemicals. This institution was no mere research hub, it was the spearhead of his pharmaceutical ambitions, staffed with scientists tasked with creating patentable compounds that would supplant natural remedies. The following year, Rockefeller launched the General Education Board (GEB) with a $1 million endowment, ostensibly to advance education, but with a sinister ulterior motive: to control medical training by funding only institutions that embraced allopathic medicine, focused on drugs and surgery, while starving those teaching holistic practices. This financial stranglehold was ruthless. Universities and medical schools desperate for funds had no choice but to align with Rockefeller's agenda, sidelining homeopathy, naturopathy, and other traditions that could not be patented or controlled. By tying medical education to his oil-derived drugs, Rockefeller ensured that the next generation of doctors would serve his interests, a tactic that foreshadowed his later manipulation of education systems to produce compliant workers and his strategic investments in global politics to secure oil interests. The decisive blow came in 1910 with the Flexner Report, a document commissioned by Carnegie but orchestrated by Rockefeller's influence, marking the culmination of his campaign to monopolize medicine. Abraham Flexner, whose brother Simon was a director at the Rockefeller Institute, toured 155 medical schools across the US and Canada, issuing a scathing critique that branded holistic institutions as unscientific and inferior. Backed by Rockefeller's vast wealth, the report's recommendations triggered a seismic shift. Over half of America's medical schools were forced to close, unable to meet the new Rockefeller-funded standards that prioritized allopathic training. Holistic practitioners faced relentless persecution. Some were fined, others imprisoned, as the American Medical Association, AMA, emboldened by Rockefeller's support, became the enforcer of this new medical orthodoxy, labeling alternative healers as quacks. By 1913, Rockefeller cemented his victory with the founding of the American Cancer Society, an organization that promoted his petrochemical drugs while dismissing natural treatments, ensuring that cancer care became a cornerstone of his profit-driven empire. This birth of Big Pharma was not a triumph of science, but a calculated conspiracy to subordinate health to wealth, a model that would echo in Rockefeller's destruction of family farms, his standardization of education, and his geopolitical maneuvers to secure oil through alliances like those supporting Israel, leaving a legacy where profit trumped humanity at every turn. In 1902, John D. Rockefeller launched the General Education Board, GEB, with a $1 million grant, a sum that would balloon to $180 million by 1930, marking the beginning of a calculated campaign to reshape American education into a tool of control, ostensibly created to improve literacy and expand access to schooling, particularly in the impoverished South. The GEB was no altruistic endeavor. It was Rockefeller's instrument for molding a workforce tailored to his sprawling industrial empire. The South, with its vast labor potential and agrarian roots, offered a fertile ground for his vision of a society where workers served the needs of his oil, pharmaceutical, and financial enterprises without question. Rockefeller understood that controlling minds was as critical as controlling markets, and education became his battlefield to suppress independent thought and ensure compliance. This initiative was a cornerstone of his broader agenda, a precursor to the global influence he would later exert through pharmaceutical monopolies, agricultural centralization, and geopolitical maneuvers in regions like the Middle East. The GEB's influence was pervasive, infiltrating every aspect of education through strategic funding of teacher training, curriculum development, and school construction, but always with strings attached that bound recipients to Rockefeller's vision. Schools that accepted his money were required to adopt a standardized model emphasizing rote memorization, punctuality, and practical skills, attributes perfectly suited to the factories, refineries, and offices of his industrial empire. Subjects that fostered critical inquiry, such as philosophy, literature, or alternative historical perspectives, were systematically sidelined, replaced by a curriculum designed to produce docile workers who would not challenge the status quo. Teachers were trained in Rockefeller-funded programs to instill discipline and conformity, ensuring that students emerged as obedient cogs in the machine of industrial progress. This was no mere reform. It was a deliberate conspiracy to stifle intellectual freedom, mirroring the tactics Rockefeller used to crush holistic medicine and foreshadowing his later efforts to centralize agriculture and secure oil interests through alliances like those supporting Israel. By controlling the minds of the young, Rockefeller ensured that his vision of a profit-driven society would face no resistance. By the 1920s, the Rockefeller model had fundamentally transformed American education, turning a once diverse system into a uniform assembly line for industrial labor. Public schools, previously varied in their approaches and responsive to local needs, became standardized institutions that churned out workers tailored to the demands of Rockefeller's oil and manufacturing enterprises. Universities, too, fell under his sway, with institutions like the University of Chicago, generously funded by Rockefeller, becoming flagships of his educational philosophy, prioritizing technical training over intellectual exploration. The GEB's influence extended beyond classrooms, shaping school boards and state policies to align with Rockefeller's agenda, ensuring that education served as a tool of control rather than liberation. This legacy of compliance embedded Rockefeller's influence deep within the fabric of society, producing generations that accepted his systems, pharmaceutical monopolies, mechanized agriculture, and geopolitical strategies as the natural order. The education system, like medicine before it, became a pillar of his empire, a chilling testament to his ability to manipulate entire systems to perpetuate his power. As the Rockefeller family's empire burgeoned in the early 20th century, their insatiable ambition to dominate society's very essence led them into the sinister realm of eugenics, a pseudoscientific movement obsessed with engineering a superior human race through selective breeding and population control. By 1910, the Rockefeller Foundation under John D. Rockefeller's meticulous guidance, began funneling millions into eugenics research, targeting institutions like the Eugenics Record Office (ERO) in Cold Spring Harbor, New York, established with their funding to collect data on human heredity. This was not a pursuit of scientific enlightenment, but a chilling strategy to sculpt populations that would fit seamlessly into their industrialized, profit-driven world, where only those deemed fit by their standards would thrive. The Rockefellers saw eugenics as a natural extension of their broader agenda, centralizing agriculture to dismantle independent farms, monopolizing medicine with petrochemical drugs, and standardizing education to produce compliant workers, now reaching into the human gene pool itself to ensure a society tailored to their vision. This dark endeavor foreshadowed their geopolitical maneuvers, such as their strategic support for Israel to secure Middle Eastern oil, revealing a dynasty that sought to control not just resources and systems, but the very makeup of humanity. The Rockefeller Foundation's grants fueled a wave of eugenics initiatives that promoted sterilization, selective breeding, and restrictive immigration policies, targeting groups labeled undesirable by eugenicists, often the poor, immigrants, minorities, and disabled, who were seen as threats to the efficiency of Rockefeller's industrial empire. By the 1920s, their funding had propelled programs that led to the forced sterilization of tens of thousands in the United States, particularly in states like California and Virginia, where laws justified by ERO research enabled the state to strip individuals of their reproductive rights. The ERO, bankrolled by Rockefeller money, amassed detailed records on families' genetic traits, creating dossiers that dehumanized entire communities and informed policies like the 1924 Immigration Act, which curtailed immigration from undesirable regions. These efforts aligned perfectly with the family's aim to craft a compliant, efficient workforce, free of those they deemed unfit, mirroring their suppression of holistic medicine and their destruction of family farms by prioritizing control over compassion. This was no mere philanthropy, it was a calculated conspiracy to manipulate humanity's future, ensuring that society served the Rockefellers' profit-driven agenda, a tactic that would later echo in their global health initiatives and geopolitical strategies. The controversy reached its darkest depths in the 1930s as Rockefeller-funded eugenics research crossed international borders, influencing Nazi Germany's racial hygiene programs with catastrophic consequences. The Foundation's grants to German institutions, including the Kaiser Wilhelm Institute for Anthropology, Human Heredity, and Eugenics, supported scientists whose work directly informed the Third Reich's policies of forced sterilizations, euthanasia, and the horrors of the Holocaust. These German researchers, armed with Rockefeller money, developed pseudo-scientific theories that justified the extermination of millions, aligning with the family's earlier efforts to control populations for industrial efficiency. After World War II, as the world recoiled from Nazi atrocities, the Rockefellers distanced themselves publicly, claiming ignorance. But their funding had undeniably fueled a movement that inflicted unimaginable suffering. This eugenics controversy was a dark mirror to their other schemes, rigging education to stifle critical thought, monopolizing pharmaceuticals to profit from human health, centralizing agriculture to erode sustainability, and destabilizing the Middle East for oil wealth, cementing their legacy as architects of a world where power trumped morality and humanity bore the cost of their unrelenting ambition. As John D. Rockefeller's domestic empire solidified, his ambitions turned to the global stage, where the Middle East's vast oil reserves beckoned with promises of untold wealth and power. By 1910, Standard Oil's unchallenged dominance in the petroleum industry had made the region a strategic linchpin, its untapped fields critical to sustaining Rockefeller's control over the lifeblood of the industrial world. Recognizing the Zionist movement's potential to establish a pro-Western foothold in this volatile region, the Rockefellers began channeling funds to Zionist organizations, supporting the purchase of land in Palestine and the establishment of Jewish settlements. This was no act of ideological fervor. It was a cold, calculated maneuver to secure a geopolitical ally that would counter Arab nationalism and ensure unfettered access to oil fields in Mesopotamia, Persia, and beyond. The Rockefellers saw in Zionism a tool to anchor Western influence in the Middle East, a strategy that mirrored their domestic conspiracies, crushing independent farmers, monopolizing medicine, and controlling education by manipulating systems to serve their profit-driven empire. Their early investments in Palestine were the opening move in a chess game that would reshape global politics, prioritizing oil wealth over regional stability and setting the stage for decades of conflict. In the 1920s and 1930s, the Rockefeller Foundation deepened this commitment, funneling millions into agricultural and medical projects that bolstered Zionist infrastructure in Palestine, all under the guise of philanthropy. These initiatives included funding for irrigation systems, experimental farms, and hospitals such as the Hadassah Medical Center, which strengthened the Jewish presence while presenting a facade of humanitarian aid. In reality, these were strategic investments to stabilize the region for oil exploration, ensuring that Palestine's development aligned with Western industrial interests, particularly those of Rockefeller-controlled companies like Standard Oil's successors. The foundation's grants also supported schools and cultural institutions, which subtly promoted a pro-Western worldview, preparing the ground for a future state that would serve as a reliable partner in the Middle East. This calculated generosity was a hallmark of Rockefeller's approach, echoing his manipulation of American education to produce compliant workers and his suppression of holistic medicine to favor petrochemical drugs. By the late 1930s, as tensions in the region grew, the Rockefellers' financial backing had transformed Palestine into a hub of Western-aligned development, a stepping stone for their oil ambitions that would later fuel their global pharmaceutical and agricultural conspiracies. When Israel was established in 1948, the Rockefellers' long game paid dividends as the new state became a key ally in securing Middle Eastern oil for companies like Exxon and Mobil, direct descendants of Standard Oil. Through their influence in Western capitals, the Rockefellers had lobbied tirelessly in the 1940s, leveraging their connections in the U.S. State Department and international bodies like the United Nations to push for the creation of a Jewish state. Their efforts ensured that Israel's formation aligned with their strategic interests, providing a stable base for oil operations amidst rising Arab nationalism. However, this triumph came at a profound cost. The Rockefellers' backing of Zionism exacerbated tensions with Arab populations, sowing seeds of conflict that would erupt into wars and unrest for decades. Their pursuit of oil wealth, cloaked in the rhetoric of progress, prioritized profit over peace, cementing their role as puppeteers of global politics. This geopolitical manipulation was a natural extension of their domestic machinations, destroying family farms to centralize agriculture, monopolizing medicine to profit from human suffering, and standardizing education to stifle dissent, revealing a dynasty that thrived on destabilizing systems for their gain, leaving the Middle East as yet another battleground in their quest for dominance. In the interwar years, the Rockefellers tightened their stranglehold on global medicine, transforming the Rockefeller Foundation, established in 1913, into a formidable force for promoting allopathic medicine and cementing their pharmaceutical empire. The foundation poured millions into research institutions and public health initiatives, ensuring that drug-based treatments dominated the medical landscape. In the United States, its grants locked medical schools into a curriculum centered on synthetic drugs, reinforcing the allopathic model established by the Flexner Report and marginalizing any remaining vestiges of holistic practices like homeopathy and naturopathy. Abroad, the Rockefellers targeted regions with rich medical traditions, such as China, where the China Medical Board, founded in 1914, invested heavily in hospitals and training programs to replace traditional Chinese medicine with petrochemical-based drugs. Though met with fierce resistance from practitioners and communities who valued their centuries-old healing methods, these efforts laid the groundwork for a global pharmaceutical system beholden to Rockefeller interests, one that prioritized patented, oil-derived compounds over natural remedies. This expansion of their medical monopoly was a natural extension of their earlier conspiracies, crushing independent farmers, standardizing education, and securing oil through geopolitical alliances, revealing a dynasty intent on controlling every facet of human existence for profit. A darker and more sinister chapter unfolded in the 1930s as the Rockefellers forged an unholy alliance with IG Farben, a German chemical conglomerate that became a cornerstone of their pharmaceutical ambitions. In 1939, Standard Oil, still under Rockefeller influence despite its 1911 breakup, formed a drug trust with IG Farben, sharing patents and technologies for synthetic drugs derived from petroleum. This partnership extended to the horrors of Auschwitz, a 100% subsidiary of IG Farben, where enslaved prisoners were subjected to gruesome drug and vaccine experiments, their suffering exploited to develop profitable compounds. Rockefeller interests reaped immense profits from these atrocities as IG Farben's innovations fueled the burgeoning pharmaceutical industry, seamlessly integrating into the Rockefeller-controlled medical system. After World War II, when IG Farben was dissolved into Bayer, BASF, and Hoechst, former Nazi executives were quietly absorbed into these companies, their expertise in chemical and pharmaceutical production continuing to serve the Rockefeller agenda. This chilling collaboration mirrored the family's ruthless tactics in other domains, destroying family farms to centralize agriculture, suppressing critical thought through education, and destabilizing the Middle East for oil, demonstrating their willingness to sacrifice morality for power and wealth. The depths of this pharmaceutical conspiracy were laid bare in 1953 with the Fitzgerald Report, commissioned by U.S. Senator Charles Tobey to investigate the suppression of alternative cancer treatments. The report exposed a web of deceit orchestrated by Rockefeller-controlled institutions, including the American Medical Association, AMA, and the Food and Drug Administration, FDA, which systematically discredited natural remedies like laetrile, a compound derived from apricot kernels that showed promise against cancer. At Sloan Kettering, a prestigious cancer research institute where Rockefellers held significant influence, rigged tests were conducted to undermine laetrile's efficacy, ensuring that only patented petrochemical-based drugs prevailed in the market. The report detailed how these institutions vilified alternative practitioners, banned natural treatments, and enforced a medical orthodoxy that served Rockefeller's profit-driven empire. This suppression of holistic remedies underscored the family's unwavering commitment to prioritizing wealth over human lives, a pattern that echoed their destruction of agrarian communities, their standardization of education to produce obedient workers, and their geopolitical maneuvers to secure oil through alliances like those supporting Israel. By 1950, the Rockefellers had cemented their pharmaceutical empire as a pillar of their global control, a machine that thrived on monopolizing health and stifling any challenge to their dominance. In the wake of World War II, the Rockefeller family's influence ascended to unprecedented heights, their empire expanding from the oil fields of America to the global stage, where they orchestrated a web of control that shaped nations and cultures. The 1911 antitrust breakup of Standard Oil had fragmented it into companies like Exxon, Chevron, and Mobil, but these remained dominant players, their operations tightly aligned with Rockefeller interests through financial networks and interlocking directorates. The family's immense wealth funded the creation of powerful institutions like the Council on Foreign Relations, CFR, established in 1921 but revitalized post-war, and the Trilateral Commission, founded in 1973 by David Rockefeller, which became instruments for steering U.S. and global foreign policy toward their oil and geopolitical objectives. These organizations ensured that decisions in Washington and beyond served Rockefeller priorities, particularly their continued support for Israel as a strategic ally in the Middle East, securing access to oil fields amidst rising tensions with Arab states. This geopolitical maneuvering was a natural extension of their earlier conspiracies, crushing family farms to centralize agriculture, monopolizing medicine to profit from synthetic drugs, and standardizing education to suppress dissent, revealing a dynasty that thrived on manipulating global systems to perpetuate their power. In the cultural realm, the Rockefellers extended their influence into Hollywood, infiltrating the burgeoning film industry to control narratives that reinforced their profit-driven agenda. By investing in major studios and production companies, they ensured that films and media glorified industrialization, consumerism, and the pharmaceutical solutions peddled by their petrochemical empire, while marginalizing alternative perspectives that might challenge their vision. Movies and television shows subtly promoted a worldview where technological progress and corporate dominance were celebrated, conditioning audiences to accept the Rockefeller-controlled systems, oil, medicine, and agribusiness as the inevitable march of progress. Documentaries and newsreels, often backed by Rockefeller funding, downplayed the environmental and social costs of their industries, while alternative voices, those advocating for sustainable farming, natural remedies, or anti-imperialist ideals, were silenced or relegated to obscurity. This cultural manipulation was a masterstroke of propaganda, mirroring their earlier efforts to reshape education and foreshadowing their global health initiatives, ensuring that the public's imagination was molded to align with the Rockefeller vision of a world dominated by profit and control. The education system, already transformed by the General Education Board's GEB earlier interventions, saw continued Rockefeller influence as their model of standardized, compliance-driven schooling spread globally. The Rockefeller Foundation, leveraging its vast resources, funded universities and research institutions worldwide, from Europe to Asia, propagating a curriculum that prioritized technical skills and vocational training over critical inquiry or intellectual freedom. This system was designed to produce a workforce tailored to the needs of Rockefeller-controlled industries, oil, pharmaceuticals, and agribusiness, ensuring that workers served as obedient cogs in their global machine. By the 1980s, this educational framework had become a global standard, with standardized testing and uniform curricula stifling independent thought in nations across the world. Institutions like the University of Chicago, long a bastion of Rockefeller influence, became models for this approach, churning out graduates who accepted the family's vision of progress without question. This global standardization of education, like their pharmaceutical monopolies and geopolitical alliances, cemented the Rockefellers' legacy as architects of a world where minds were molded to serve their interests, a chilling testament to their ability to control not just resources, but the very ideas that shape society. In the late 20th century, the Rockefeller family transitioned from overt domination to a more insidious, pervasive form of influence, their shadow extending across global systems with a subtlety that belied their unrelenting ambition. The Rockefeller Foundation, a cornerstone of their empire since 1913, became a linchpin in global health initiatives, notably through its deep involvement in the World Health Organization's vaccination campaigns, which critics argue were designed to prioritize pharmaceutical profits over genuine health outcomes. These campaigns, often heralded as humanitarian triumphs, funneled billions into the coffers of drug companies tied to Rockefeller interests, promoting synthetic vaccines while sidelining natural and traditional remedies that could not be patented. Simultaneously, the family's support for Israel evolved, shifting from early land purchases to strategic investments in the country's burgeoning tech and energy sectors, reinforcing Israel's role as a hub for Rockefeller-aligned interests in the Middle East. This modern geopolitical strategy, rooted in securing oil and influence in an unstable region, echoed their earlier machinations, crushing family farms, monopolizing medicine, and standardizing education, revealing a dynasty that had mastered the art of controlling global systems while cloaking their agenda in the guise of progress. The petroleum conspiracy that once devastated American farms morphed into a broader, more sophisticated control over global food systems, perpetuating Rockefeller's legacy of prioritizing profit over sustainability. Through partnerships with agribusiness giants like Monsanto and Cargill, Rockefeller-funded initiatives aggressively promoted genetically modified GM crops and chemical fertilizers, transforming agriculture in developing nations under the banner of the Green Revolution, a foundation-backed program launched in the mid-20th century, but expanded in scope by the 1980s. While marketed as a solution to world hunger, this revolution eroded traditional farming practices, forcing farmers in countries like India and Mexico into dependency on costly Rockefeller-controlled inputs, seeds that required annual repurchasing, and petroleum-based chemicals that degraded soil fertility. The environmental toll was staggering. Deforestation, water contamination, and loss of biodiversity became hallmarks of this corporate-driven agriculture, mirroring the ecological devastation of Rockefeller's early oil empire. This modern agricultural system, like its predecessor that dismantled family farms, served as a testament to the family's enduring commitment to centralizing control, a strategy that paralleled their pharmaceutical monopolies and their efforts to mold minds through education, ensuring that global food production remained tethered to their profit-driven empire. As of 2025, the Rockefeller name may have faded from public consciousness, but their influence remains omnipresent, woven into the fabric of modern life like a shadow that refuses to lift. The pharmaceutical industry, built on their petrochemical foundation, continues to drive crises like the opioid epidemic, with companies linked to Rockefeller interests profiting from addiction while suppressing natural remedies like herbal treatments or holistic therapies that challenge their monopoly. The education system, shaped by the General Education Board's legacy, persists in producing compliant workers through standardized testing and curricula that stifle critical thought, ensuring that new generations question neither the corporate dominance of agriculture nor the pharmaceutical stranglehold on health. From the drugs in our medicine cabinets to the lessons taught in our schools, from the oil powering our world to the geopolitical alliances shaping the Middle East, where Israel remains a key player in securing Rockefeller interests, the family's shadow looms large. Their dynasty, built on ambition, deception, and a relentless quest for control, stands as a chilling testament to their ability to manipulate systems at the expense of humanity's freedom and well-being, a legacy that continues to shape a world where profit reigns supreme and independence is a distant memory. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this and would like to see more, please like the video and subscribe to the channel. Make sure to hit the bell so you are notified when a new video is dropped. Until next time, uncover the truth and question the past.